Welcome to Marin Poets Live. I'm Neshama Franklin. I work at the Fairfax Library and I love poetry. So it is a special pleasure for me to share this opportunity to introduce you to poets from our county in the flesh, as it were, as they read and discuss their work. Monthly tapings would be broadcast on Marin TV and then become part of a special page on our website, along with biographies of the poets and links to our collection. This is a partnership with the Marin Poetry Center. A common thread throughout the programs will be discovering how living in Marin has influenced their poetry. Those of you who already love poetry will appreciate this direct transmission from the poet to the listener, you. Those who might think of poetry as esoteric or abstract will discover how it can sing when read aloud. For this show, we feature Janet Jennings. Welcome, Janet.
Oh, thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thank you for what you're doing for Marin Poetry.
My total pleasure. So the Marin poem, that's what we start with.
Yes. So when my daughters were very young, we lived in Bolinas, and we were a very short walk from Bolinas Beach, so we spent a lot of time there. And I felt for those years, we would go to the lagoon, watch when the tides were low and watch the harbor seals, and so many times I felt like I was living in a National Geographic documentary. But this first poem I'm going to read takes place at Bolinas Beach, and one other thing of note is that my husband is a surfer, so that seems to feature in this poem. So this is called At the Water's Edge. A blue swell pushes across the water to Bolinas, the curving lap a comma between land and sea. I carried 2 mermaids in my body, and then they came to land. They remember the rolling over and floating, and before that, heaven. 12 surfers fall and rise, waiting on their boards for a fast right. At the water's edge, 2 small girls shriek when the waves roll in and try to pull them back. Out where the floor drops deep, white sharks hunt. One young surfer pushed 3 feet out of the water, punched a shark hard in the eye, and was released. 3 tooth holes below the ribs. Helicopter blades cut the sun as they airlifted him away. I want my daughters to stay at the water's edge, not venture past the shore break or get pulled out to the sudden dark trench. They remember the rolling over and floating, foam catching their legs.
Oh, that's remarkable. Such a microcosm, starting with the sweet, starting with the calm, getting to the shark, getting to your own personal experience. My favorite kind of poem. And I live in Bolinas, so that speaks to me very loud and beautifully and subtly as well.
So there's the beauty, and then there's the savagery.
Right.
Yeah, or the danger.
That's life. There you have it.
And as a mother, that really comes up.
Yeah, life as distilled through poetry, which is what we're doing here. So how about another one?
Okay. Well, I'm going to stay on the daughter theme. So I have twin daughters. They're 12 now. So these poems are early in their lives. This next poem was written after we visited the San Francisco Zoo for the first time, and it's called Black Rhino. After the zoo, after the black rhino, alone in his paddock, stared at us with one eye, his head in profile with 2 smooth stumps above his nose. We drive home, have dinner, get ready for bed. Then, while I zip up her footed jammies, Marina asks, why the rhino doesn't have his horn. Diceros bicornis, 2-horned, once spread across wide African grasslands and savannas. decimated. I don't know, honey, I don't know why. Aphrodisiac, fever reducer, decorative dagger handle, horns up to 50 inches in length, made of hard, compressed, hair-like fibers. What the rhino say? Her hand on my arm. What they do, Mama? In a New Zealand zoo, they removed the horns of one female so she couldn't fend off her suitor, then tried artificial insemination. Nothing worked. They say, no, no, you can't have your horn? My daughter circles the missing horns, her questions over and over. How to hold this new world inside her hazel eyes. Protected by armed guards in small sanctuaries. Sometimes their horns are cut off to spare them from poachers. Marina, my sea girl, how can I keep you whole?
That is so beautiful. And I love the footy pajamas. I mean, and all that domestic stuff is so grounding and so comforting in the midst of some pretty bleak material there.
As I'm looking at these poems, I'm realizing how high my protective mom energy was up.
Right.
When they were, especially when they were little.
Right. Well, the poems rise out of the most important thing to you.
Yeah.
That, which is great. Yeah. So more, please.
Okay. So something I tell all my friends. I had my children late in life. I had a business for 20 years, which I then sold, and allowed space for both a family and poetry. And what I say is that being a mother has made me a better human. So here's one poem about that experience. Learning a new game. We sit on the family room floor to play fish for the first time. I show my daughters how to shuffle, cut, deal, match. We play open hand. They don't know yet about winning. Proud of the 5 big blue-backed cards they hold. We place them face down on the brown stain-blended rug. Stella Starfish, Leroy Lobster, and their friends. Charlie hands me her seahorse to make a pair, lit up with being the first to spot a match. She gives her cards away with such pleasure, and I catch myself already tensed with the habit of going it alone, defending what's mine. They are laughing, my daughters, leaning into each other, making sets of 2 on the floor. Living close to the ground can change things, out beyond the idea of winning or losing. There is a world. Yes. Well, you know those Rumi lines, you know, out beyond right and wrong, there they are. You picked it up, and I love Rumi, and yes. I very much thought of him at the very end.
Yes.
I thought I understood him in a whole new way.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Well, when did you come to poetry?
So I first had my falling in love with poetry in junior high school. We studied poetry. We got Louis Untermeyer's Treasury of Great Poems. Yeah. And in thumbing through, particularly in the more modern poems, I absolutely fell in love. I was playing piano. I loved jazz. I loved music. And so I was finding music in words, and it just hit me. Yeah. But and so I wrote. I was encouraged by my teacher to keep writing. It was a perfect time, a place to put angst and questions and all those things that happen at that age. But I came from a very business-oriented, very practical, in-the-world family where there was simply, well, there'll be none of that, thank you. And so I feel like my journey back to poetry it took me a long time. I did what I was supposed to do. I had a business, and I was very passionate about it, and yet I never felt like I was in the world I belonged in. And poetry kept knocking on the door. I would go to readings, I took classes, I would read poetry, and that kept feeling like home to me.
Yeah.
And I finally got into a position to sell my business so I could make room for that.
That's great. But I think of all of these journeys as times of great ripening. So it's possible that if you had been able to start, you know, from that adolescent springboard, your poems, of course, they would be different.
Well, there's something to be said about the lived experience, so that one lives it and then really has moved around in life and can speak out of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Another poem, please.
Okay. Speaking of lived experience, I'm going to read a poem about my grandmother, my father's mother, who was a very elegant and very strong woman. This poem was written after my last visit with her before she died of bone cancer, and it's called Grandmother. She moved in a cloud world down the curved staircase into the pre-dawn hours. I had been sleeping on a bench beside the stairs, waiting. I had been riding a white horse for miles under a crescent moon. She took my hand, led me to the living room, blue silk gown and matching robe, her thin shoulders curved slightly forward. We sat quietly, looking out at the dark where the bones of her garden lay. "The deer," she whispered. I leaned in. Her long-fingered hands held mine. I saw her elegant blue veins, the morphine patches on her arms. "The deer," she said. A moon-colored doe stepped out of her marrow, her pain. I saw it glow there, haloed inside the night, travel past the wintering garden and enter a stand of white pine.
The bones of her garden, and the deer, which also has the other spelling of the deer. How old were you when she died? Because it's very hard to pin. You know, I mean, I couldn't. That's why I'm asking you. How old were you when she died?
I did not. So I was in my late 30s.
Ah.
And then I carried this experience around.
Yeah.
And wasn't sure how to come at it. And so I kept coming at it. And finally one day I just had it.
Right. But there is that sense of childlike wonder in it, and sleeping on the bench in the curve of the stairs. So I had you as a young person in that as well. So, you know, who knows? The poetry falls on the ear and sets what resonances it sets.
But I think you've caught something, which is maybe we're always children with our grandparents.
Ah, yes.
And there's that early relationship set up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very beautiful.
Oh,
Another
thank
one,
you.
please.
Well, I think I'll go even further back in time. So on the other side of my family, my mother's side, they several generations ago came from Ireland, the west of Ireland, and her family name was Desmond. And my grandfather was a great storyteller, and I wasn't always sure about the history that he would illustrate for us. At one point, he traced us all the way back to the Mona Lisa. What? And the Geraldinis. But anyways, they did live in Munster in the west of Ireland, and I encountered some stories out of a Yeats story collection. He went through west of Ireland collecting old stories, and I encountered one about the Earl of Desmond, so I sort of worked it into my family lore. This is called Anya and the Earl of Desmond. Away in the west in Munster, the Earl of Desmond walked the banks of Lough Gur, composing verses. He found a woman beside the lake, combing waves of copper hair. Her eyes were deep green water. A moss cloak lay on rounded stones. He seized the cloak and the woman became his wife. Every marriage has a myth. Their son Gerald, known as the magician, could pour himself in and out of open bowls like water to make his mother laugh. The teller of a tale tilts its meaning. Anya, bright light, queen of rivers, lakes, and wells, ruled Munster from her sacred hill. Monks tried to dethrone her, but she held her ancestral lands. Threw her cloak of seduction over tribal chieftains and an Anglo-Norman earl. Possessor, possessed, my mother's family's unsettled history. The Earl of Desmond vanished in the year 1398. Some say he lives beneath the lake with Anya in her crystal palace. Every 7 years he rises to ride the lake's rim on a white stallion shod with silver. Castle ruins, ghost water, lost rebellions against the British crown. He was the poet earl, given to fancies and long walks beside Loch Gur, the rhythm of his footsteps, loosening verses from the depths.
You got yourself the ancestor that's coming right through you. And you know, it starts almost like a ballad. You know, it's just very rich with the imagery that I recognize from ballads and stories.
Oh,
it's draped with them. It's delightful.
Well, I will say that as I began writing poetry more seriously, I encountered prose poetry. And what I loved about that is it has the lyric quality, the rhythms, and all the beautiful sounds of poetry, but it also gives you a vessel or form in which to tell a story. Mm-hmm. And so I love that meeting of the
right.
two.
Read that line about the teller tilts, that if you can find it again.
Just that one line.
Yeah.
The teller of a tale tilts its meaning.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's all beautiful, but that's what I want to eat. Another poem, please.
Okay, let's think. Okay. This next poem is sort of a poem as wish fulfillment, so it was really fun to write. When I was in high school, I played piano. I was very much in love with jazz music, and one of my artist heroes was Miles Davis, the trumpet player, the band leader, who was always experimenting with music. Mm-hmm. He brought in a lot of young players and just gave them a lot of room to explore. So I loved that about him. So this poem is called Visitation. In my next life, rumors will blow through New York City like a rasping wind or a ghost scraping concrete. Miles is looking for you. Somebody's joke, I'll think. Weeks will go by. Then a spare, bluesy summoning, almost a voice. Miles wants you. Show up in 2 hours. No more than that, but this time I will. I'll know where to meet and get there early, wondering what he wants, how he's even heard of me. I'll power up, hands above the keyboard, and wait. Just when I think he won't show, in he comes, looking sharp, horn case in hand, dry whispering across the room. You listen and you play. He unpacks his trumpet in one deft motion, pauses before he puts it to his lips. Play what you don't know.
Wow. Now, did he actually ever say that? Or he did? You're quoting him.
Play what you don't know.
Yes.
And I was so in love with that as permission, artistic permission.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I as I sort of took that message in, I thought, that's the challenge I want to set for myself.
It's a beautiful dream projection, and it's not too fancy. I mean, it's Gruddy Miles in there, and I love those first sounds you started with, which are not melodic musical sounds, but the cry of necessity almost.
Oh, and I was trying to work in, there's many stories about how Miles Davis got a very raspy voice. One, that he was in some kind of fight outside of Birdland, and another that he had some kind of throat operation. But I wanted that raspiness.
Yes, you got it.
Yeah.
It came. You have so much fun with your poetry. I mean, it's just imbued with joy.
Oh, thank you for
and
that.
it's also showing in your face. So it's a lovely experience.
So another fun obsession. My husband's father lives in Washington State, just over the border from Oregon, and we go annually to visit him. We fly into Portland, we drive through parts of Oregon, and we always pass through the town of Astoria, Oregon. And along our route is this neon sign, Desdemona Club. And for some reason, I think because it had a sort of kitschy quality to it, the sign itself, the old neon, I just kept thinking about this sign. And so I did a little research on it and went and visited the bar and you know, looked back at Shakespeare's play Othello, where Othello is so jealous he kills his poor wife, Desdemona, who has always been true to him, but he's gone mad. So I sort of tried to bring all of the little history of Astoria, the weather, Desdemona into this exploration of this sign. It's called Desdemona Club. In this dismal niche, once waterfront before the dam, transients and those who stay too long drink to blessed numbness or oblivion. Cold, gray, unchanging, rooms by the day above the bar. An ill-starred ship lends its name to this neon aquarium. Strong drinks, hard winters. There was a woman, what seems, what is. Her lover fell through a trap door. Oh, willow, willow. The Desdemona, inbound from San Francisco, ran aground, gave up its name one New Year's Day to shoals and shifting sands north of the channel, where ocean and river oppose and churn. 16 million Chinook once ran this river before the dam, before loggers, trappers, fishermen. Draft horses stabled offshore on barns, on pilings, seined the river bar at ebb tide. Belly deep in brackish water, they hauled out great arcing nets of glistening silver. A beauty ran off with an older man, a foreigner, the river's headlong rush. She was in love and he proved mad. Oh, willow, willow. They foundered in the turbulent churn. Annie's tavern dancers down the street's been closed. The canneries are gone. 2 fish swim in opposite directions. The Desdemona Club. 4 pool tables, well drinks, fries, serves spirits and asylum from the storm.
That is so layered. It's just delicious.
Oh, thank you.
I went there with you, and it's an elegiac celebration, all in the same breath.
Oh, such an interesting combination.
It really is an interesting combination, and I love the way it just seized you. And I like that nature of obsession. We have 3 minutes left. Do you have a 3-minute poem or?
Okay, I'll try that. So another interesting area for me to explore now that at the time I overlooked was that my family on my father's side was in the chocolate business. And there's something about when you grow up, you sort of take for granted your background. At least I will speak for myself on it and think, oh, well, that's just my life. And later on, I thought, but it's chocolate. So I started exploring some of what it was like to grow up. My grandfather started a factory in Chicago. And my father had a complicated relationship with his father, but he did follow his father into the chocolate business. So this poem is called Konjam, and it's the process in which the chocolate is sort of polished and mixed for several days. It's the secret of chocolate making once you have all the ingredients. So here's the poem, Konjam. Warm chocolate blends in a giant vat, a conch, large paddles slowly turning. From the Spanish concha, shell of the tropical sea snail. Hot Chicago summers, my father as a boy dumped cocoa liquor into steaming batch tanks in his father's factory. No labor spared in learning the cost of chocolate making. One night in Bern in 1879, Rudolph Lindt, an early pioneer, forgot to close down a shell-shaped conch, his own invention. It rolled and mixed till his return next morning. Dismayed, he tasted the agitated chocolate and found a creamy smoothness, new complexity. Aeration, friction, polishing, 3 days of constant turning drives off the bitter volatiles. Like the conch shell blown by Hindu heroes on the battlefield, their mighty horns atomizing enemies. And though he tried, my grandfather could not drive the softness from the center of his son's soul. Once, on the telephone, my father, mellowed by painkillers, told me how, afloat on a Navy boat during the Korean War, waiting for codes to break on the late shift, he read Leaves of Grass, Browning, Frost. That is how I want to think of him, some salvaged part still floating in Whitman. But he had to shut it down, go numb, under the day and night agitation of my grandfather's toughening. Sad boy with golden hair, too tender, grew a horny foot and sealed himself inside the strange, spiraling chamber of yet another shell.
Very beautiful, Janet Jennings. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me and for your support.